Got it? So we can proceed with that. Let me get it. Representative Kelly. Representative Kelly, where are you going? You think we're going to, when you like to stand at the podium?
Whatever works for you, Madam Chair.
Is this your first time at Health and Human Services?
My first time, yes ma'am.
Oh, and...
Excited to be here.
And how long have you been in the legislature?
This is my second year.
And you put in a request with my staff to go sooner than later?
And
there's a reason I ought to honor this?
I ask if I may get to go towards the beginning because we have a vote and judiciary committee, which I just rushed away from.
It's going to be something that I would approve?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, then I guess that we will let it. So we have pardon? Oh. I mean, Representative Wilkinson would like to see your credentials for being a representative, not a page.
I'll be glad to show those to the.
And with that, we'll quit giving you a hard time and let you know.
I wouldn't expect any less, Chairman Reinders.
He was asking me not to ask you any hard questions.
Okay.
And also, Madam Chair, is this appropriate time for us to wish Alan Peake, Representative Peake, a happy birthday?
Not unless he and Representative Reinders will admit that they're twins born on the same day.
And Chairman Reinders as well.
Twin sons of different mothers.
I will stick around if the committee will sing happy birthday. I won't rush off as quick.
And to the committee, we don't normally, go on like this, but, since it was Representative Kelly's first time. Okay, Representative Kelly has House Bill 910.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm coming before you today with House Bill 910, which essentially creates a certification process for the state to recognize a concept known as medical legal partnerships. Currently in Georgia, there's 3 medical legal partnerships in existence, the largest of which is one I'm most familiar with, which is called HELP, which is a health law partnership, which is a voluntary and joint collaboration between Children's Healthcare, Atlanta Legal Aid, and Georgia state law. And what a medical legal partnership is it's a recognition both from healthcare providers and the legal community that there are some healthcare issues that can't always be treated directly with medicine, and that there's some root causes that enlisting a legal professional could help address better. So essentially, this is a concept which has been around since the 1980s. It was started at Boston Medical by Dr. Barry Zuckerman. And it was out of his frustration that he recognized that there were some children who were coming in, low-income children, which this bill is really kind of, most of these medical legal partnerships are tailored to, that there were just some issues that he couldn't treat with medicine. One example specifically that stuck out to me is a child maybe with asthma. And typically you're seeing children here who are on our state Medicaid rolls. They're low-income children. And the child came in and he was suffering from asthma. And he was constantly having to come back and forth and be treated. A lot of times he was coming in through the emergency room, which we know is the most expensive form of health care. And that child, he was sent him home, but then he'd be right back. Well, he got back around to the idea that what was going on is that child was living in a home that was filled with mold. And while a doctor could continue to give him care, and eventually it was flare back up when he was at his home. And so by enlisting a legal professional, however, they were able to send a letter and have that child's case resolved. Ultimately, the child quit having to come to the doctor 3 or 4 times a month and only a couple times a year. One, providing more effective healthcare treatment for the child, while also saving, the state Medicaid dollars in the process. What this says right now is we would allow DCH to create a certification process for these medical legal partnerships, but also there's an important line in there that says that in no way should not seeking a certification prevent any of these medical legal partnerships from existing. Essentially what this does is really all the medical legal partnerships are funded through private dollars. And so by allowing them to get an extra kind of recognition, a certification level from the state, it can help them with their donors and expand this outreach in our state.
Questions from the committee? Although I first say, are you not in law school?
Yes, ma'am.
That's the reason for this.
Well, that's where I became familiar with the concept. Yes, ma'am.
With the concept of if you talk longer, you get paid more money. If this happens to make it out of this committee and out of rules, are you going to adhere to the quicker you get out of the well, the more likely is your bill will get passed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you'll let me approve what you're going to say beforehand?
Always.
Okay. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Broadwick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Kelly, just a couple of things that came to mind. It seemed like this would be sort of a case-by-case. It would not be in a group setting unless it was representing a group of like individuals. Is that correct?
Yeah, typically this is done through individuals. And so the way the HELP concept works is Atlanta Legal Aid pays for and provides a legal professional, an attorney, and then Children's provides them office space at their facility, and their doctors or other medical personnel, nurses, anyone there, sometimes recognizes when a legal professional could be useful and recommends that individual and their family too.
Okay, and along that vein, if I could, one more question, please.
Go ahead.
The example you gave of the child that was in a situation with mold, would that be a legal landlord-tenant relationship that they could enter into that
they would be in that
from a public health standpoint?
Yes.
And one more, please, if I could, please. It would not apply to any labor issues, for instance, employer-employee relationships or disputes as far as health coverage?
No.
In that vein. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank
Okay.
you, Madam Chair.
Representative Reiners.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to make sure I understand what we're doing here. We got one medical service provider, and they look at the patient and they go, you know what, you might need a lawyer.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the committee? Okay. We have one person that would like to speak to the issue. Mr. Tatum, identify yourself and who you're with.
Hi, David Tatum with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is the entity formed by the merger of Eggleston and Scottish Rite in 1998, and we operate Eggleston, Scottish Rite, the Hugh Spalding Children's Hospital, for Grady and the Marcus Autism Center. And for the past decade, this is the 10th year in a row, we have had a very positive and productive relationship with the HELP legal program out of Georgia State. In that 10 years, they have seen approximately 6,000 individual clients and have helped them deal with issues such as being evicted from their homes or having utilities cut off. And I can tell you it's hard to discharge a child that needs to go home when they've got no place to live and there's no power for them to be there. It is an interesting concept. You actually have outside attorneys in the same buildings and offices next door to doctors, which many find a foreign concept, but it works for us. It's been very productive. It's been very helpful. We have seen them handle a lot of cases that help kids get out of the hospital quicker, which saves us costs, saves the state cost, and we've had a positive relationship with them. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Tatum? No questions? Thank you very much. All right. What is the pleasure of the committee? I'm open for... Okay, we have a motion to move the bill and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, everybody in favor of the passage of House Bill 910, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say no. Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Representative
member of
Kelly?
the committee. Thank you.
Be sure you vote the way I want you to on that bill.
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay. Next up, Representative Knight. Are you behind a pole somewhere? There you are. Okay. We have House Bill 606.
Madam Chairman, my first time before this committee.
Well, being a chairman, I will let you sit if you'd like. If you feel more comfortable sitting wherever you want to sit. I did have to give the freshmen a little bit of a hard time. Is he on? Maybe it's a difference in your height.
Yeah.
I don't want to ever come to your committee. You probably would want to go after some other size with me.
Members of the committee, and I apologize, I'm bringing up the bill on the internet. I don't have a copy with me, but if you'll bear with me to bring up. All right. Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I want to start by probably getting into why this bill, and I know this topic has come up before the committee in prior years, but I think it's important to go and look at probably what are some issues or problems, that some inconsistencies with what we have in law and our rules, and what are some of the potential downsides or even potential liabilities that the state is facing, and then potentially what are some of our tax-paying citizens facing. As you know, for the private home care providers, a lot of those providers are providing services that are being funded through Medicaid, right? And so Medicaid is looking back to Georgia law as to see that we are doing things correctly, and that the administration of these providers, that they're acting in accordance with Georgia law, and to make sure that they're doing it correctly, or otherwise we may have a situation where the feds come in and say, hey, you didn't do this according to Georgia law, and we may end up with possibly in an audit situation owing the feds back because this was done incorrectly. And I want to point out what the problem is. And the problem is that we are allowing independent contractors under one part of the law to come in here, okay, and that's what the bill is trying to seek. But when you look at the regulations, okay, everything is saying, hey, it must be supervised. And we have a conflict here. You can't have an independent relationship and also have a supervisory relationship. And so it is very conflictual in nature. And if you go back and you look through the regulations, it's very clear. The DCH regulations requires all workers must be supervised, trained, and they're required to follow specific service plans for each of the clients that they supervise. So we've got a relationship there in which you can't have somebody independent that's out there, and then on one hand that provider, saying, hey, I'm supervising that independent contractor that we have out there. It's a conflict. And so I would say that is one issue that we need to look at and address. The second issue is that from a level playing field perspective, you've got some people that are following the rules as are stated, and you've got some people that aren't. And so that's causing a difference in an economic hardship on some, per se, are costing more to provide services than the others who aren't following the rules. I'll be specific with some of the statute and the regulations. If you go and you look at the Department of Community Health regulations for private health care providers, it says no provider shall provide services that are prohibited by the following rules, okay? And they're talking about agreements that they must enter into with the client, okay? There must be policies and procedures, okay? So how can a home care provider set policies and procedures and then go out and hire somebody, an independent contractor, to come in and follow those policies and procedures? You can't. The very definition of an independent contractor is they're independent. You can't tell them how to do their job, what to do. You can only ask them to do the job. Great example. As a CPA and someone who used to do a lot of audits, I'm an independent contractor. Or if I prepare your tax return, I'm an independent contractor. You can't come in and tell me how to do my job. You can hire me to do a job, but you don't control how I do it, when I do it, the tools that I do it, where I do it, okay? But the relationship, if you go back through these rules, are very clear that the Department of Community Health has established rules, and it is an employee relationship. An employee relationship. And if you go through the rules, it's just everything is about, how do you charge for the services? It's the home care provider that's charging and billing. They're responsible for it. What about bonding? There's sometimes that these home health care providers are hired, and they go into someone's home, and they're helping not only with maybe nursing needs, but it could be paying bills or driving someone's car, personal car. These are things that are in the rules here. But they've got to be bonded. So who's bonded? The independent contractor? Or is the home health care provider the one that's bonded? How can you bond an independent contractor? So again, very much a big conflict that we have here. All the way from lawsuits, on up. What's that relationship between an employer and an independent contractor? Part of the process, and I think there's someone here that was in the industry that will maybe speak more specifically to the process, but it's about coming up with a care plan for whoever the ultimate client is. Tailoring needs, it could be doctors that are involved with telling them what to do, or what care needs need to be there. But you're always reviewing the plan. You're always going back and supervising and reviewing the plan. How can an employer go back and supervise and review the work of an independent contractor? You can't. You can't. So we have a conflict here. In regards to everything that's in the rules and regs, and again, it's in code because it allows for independent contractors in code, but everything is based on, a supervisory role. And so again, to the members of the committee, two things. I think we possibly could find ourselves in jeopardy should the feds ever come in and decide to audit or look at those funds that are being passed down through Medicaid, and are going out and paying for this care of these particular clients are eligible for Medicaid, home care services. And if they find that these these home care providers are in violation of our own laws, then there's possibly something I think the state should be concerned about, of having to repay back these funds, because the state would be responsible for it. But I also think even on a individual basis or a business basis, these businesses that are hiring these independent contractors are also probably in jeopardy of the tax code. So if they get audited and they find out that these employers, these so-called independent contractors, are indeed actually employers, because everything that I've told you about, the supervision, all these elements, are what makes up an employee, are actually in fact there, then you're probably going to end up with some businesses that are in serious violation of federal and state tax code, especially in regards to payroll issues, workers' comp, things like that. And the second thing is you've got a lot of folks out there who are these maybe independent contractors, or think they're independent contractors. Where's the protection for them should something happen, from a liability point of view? So I would like to have a meaningful discussion with this committee and look at this very hard, because I think this is truly, we have a big conflict here with what's in Georgia code and possibly jeopardizing some of our federal funds. So
ready for questions?
I'll
Mr. Chairman?
be happy to
Okay. Representative Kidd.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gentleman, your full question. I agree with you 100,000% that the state needs to do the best it can do to make sure that when someone's treating another person, they have the proper education and requirements and so forth. But I also know that maybe the word independent contractor is too broad in a lot of ways when it comes down to health care or something, because there's not a hospital in the state that could exist today probably without independent contractors providing nursing services or whatever else. Half the people sitting behind you are independent contractors working, lobbying for different associations and so forth. But I agree with you, we need to do something to make sure that if I own a healthcare facility and I'm hiring a, quote, independent contractor to provide care to the individuals that are in my facility, that they have the educational criteria and so forth to do what they're supposed to do, be it directly through me, as I tell them what to do if I hire them, or they have the proper education to do that. Are we doing that in this legislation? Because I agree with you 100% on what you're saying.
Well, I think we're trying to clarify the rules, and by code, you know, we're striking the part about independent contractors. I mean, by the very rules that we've talked about as far as what a home health care provider is, and the rules by which they've got to comply to be licensed and to provide these services, these rules don't set up for a situation where you can just go out and say, hey, I'm hiring an independent contractor off the street, and you know, because that's the nature of the relationship. As an independent contractor, then I'm responsible. Again, it goes back to, and I'm not a labor lawyer, but usually, you know, if you tell somebody when to show up, what they're to do, how they're to do it, you give them the tools to do it, and you supervise them, you know, those are elements that says, hey, I'm in charge, and you're acting as an agent on my behalf. So, you know, where's that responsibility and that liability? But as a CPA, a perfect example, either doing your tax return or doing an audit, I'm held accountable if I do it wrong, okay? Because I am independent. It's in the very nature of why it's independent versus an employee who's working on behalf of someone. And again, I'm sure there are some attorneys and some folks who understand labor law and some of the things a whole lot better than I do that can more eloquently illustrate it.
One last question, if I may. How do you think this would affect the hospitals in the state today that hire independent contractors to provide nursing services, provide radiologic services?
Well, great question, Representative Kidd. If you look at what we're doing in the bill, this does not, all I'm focusing on is the private home care provider. Okay, that's it. I'm not, you know, we're looking at what's in Georgia code as to, you know, what are the requirements, what it means to be a private home care provider.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Henson.
Thank you. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you pick private homes and not other professions as you're looking at dealing with independent contractors?
I'm not sure I've picked or looking at. I know that there's a specific issue that's going out there. I happen to have home care providers in my district, so I'm very familiar with the issue that we're speaking of here. So it's not a matter of I went out and picked something, and I'm not trying to deal with independent contractors. That's something to be evaluated independently on, you know, what is the relationship between someone, you know, an independent contractor or possibly an employee with whoever is paying them. That should be evaluated independently. But in this case, we're trying to focus in on a specific issue that, again, I apologize for not having copies, but I'll be happy to get copies to the committee of things from the rules and regulations, the code section that is what is required of the home care providers in Georgia law and under the Department of Community Health as far as the rules and regulations that govern them.
Just to follow up too, having worked in other medical professions or professions that care for people, independent contractors are hired when somebody's taking a vacation. They're hired when somebody's out sick. They're hired to cover other situations. What happens when you suddenly have an employee who falls, breaks their leg, and is out for a month? Who do you hire? You don't have another employee. You've got to bring in someone else. So therefore, you hire an independent contractor, but yet you're saying an independent contractor cannot work there. So do you employ someone else for 1 month?
I think this is only within the home health care providers, the industry. I'm not talking about...
I understand it's within, but there's other people. And that's what I don't understand. I mean, they're going to have people, and they're going to have people that are out sick and on vacation. And...
Well, but the rules are such, again, Representative, that the relationship and the rules are required of a home health care provider to be licensed and to follow, to make sure they're in compliance with Georgia code and Georgia rules and regulations is such that there's a whole list of requirements, okay? And those requirements in and of themselves are not lending itself to an independent contractor situation, okay? You cannot supervise someone else, okay, an independent contractor. You can't. That's the federal code and Georgia law, especially with tax law. Independent contractors, again, there's a whole host of how you get there. But if you're answering to me, I tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Okay. Tools to do it, and I review you and supervise you. You're an employee.
I guess I'm just going to say, if you're in a dental facility and you bring in a hygienist as an independent contractor, you're a doctor, you bring in a registered nurse, you're going to tell them what to do, and you're going to provide the tools for them in which to do it. And you expect them to turn up at a certain time and take a certain amount of time and all of it.
Let me, Representative, I'm not talking about, a dentist,
I know you're not, but I don't understand the difference.
Representative Knight, let me see if I can help you out a little bit. Representative Henson, I think, and Representative Knight, correct me if I'm wrong, the federal rules, we're dealing with Medicare patients, and the feds are paying a large portion of that, Medicare too, and they have written rules that are very strict about who can be the providers that take care of people in their homes. This is not any other kind of issue. This is for them. And our laws seem to be in conflict with the federal laws, and they are beginning to do audits. Am I right, Representative Knight?
I think you're right, but I think, and I know you and I had a conversation offline.
Okay.
What the feds, I believe, are actually going to do is actually look at Georgia law and Georgia rules and regulations. And so I'm not sure I can point to a specific federal law as far as requiring that money, but they're going to look at Georgia law and they're going to say, are you following Georgia law? Okay? And currently, Georgia law is conflicted because it's allowing for an independent contractor in a scenario where by the very rules and regs that are governing these home health care providers, that there cannot be an independent contractor relationship. And
Okay, let's go on to other questions, and maybe it'll clarify it for you more. So it's only in that one situation, home health care providers.
Yeah.
Representative Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the discussion, Chairman Knight, on this. This is quite intriguing. What percentage would you say now of people providing private home care providers would you consider non-employees now?
I don't have any statistics.
And the reason I'd ask that is because if it was, just follow the logic, if it was less than 1%, we'd be going, we're answering a problem that doesn't exist. If it was 90% on the other side, we'd be sitting there going, boy, this is rampant. What I don't want is the unintended consequences of bigger home health care providers locking out somehow smaller ones. How do you balance public safety versus free enterprise and competition?
Well, I'm not sure I've got it. Let me try to answer your question, but focus back on what I'm trying to do. The bill deals with what is the definition and what are the requirements for being a private home care provider, okay, a licensed home care provider in the state of Georgia. And you go and then you look at all the rules and regs by which you've got to follow if you're going to be in this business of being a home health care provider. So while I don't have statistics, I would bet that the people who are in business of, and I'm not talking about individuals, this doesn't deal with the individual or me having to go hire somebody to sit with my mom.
Okay, well, hold on. That's exactly what I'm trying to...
Who are in the business of doing it, okay? That we have a conflict, and if you go back to the regulations under DCH and you read through those regulations, they're conflicted. You can't have that independent relationship, independent contract relationship, and follow, okay, what is the rules and regs of the Department of Community Health in regards to these home health care providers. So, again, I'm not, statistics, I'm not, but I would say that everybody...
Well, if a third of them are operating as independent contractors, okay, that we have felt forever was fine, and all of a sudden we're saying because we're concerned that maybe our language is wrong, what's going to happen to those third? Do they just become compliant?
Well, yeah, I mean, if the rules are such that, I mean, I would hope that the committee and everyone would agree.
I mean, I'm assuming
rules or not is that, we want everyone. If you got to play the game, everybody needs to play by the rules and play fairly.
All right, you believe that this would no way exclude or put somebody in a competitive disadvantage?
No,
Okay.
I actually, there's probably people already in are being disadvantaged because there are people who aren't playing by the rules.
And
go ahead.
See, you just when you say not playing by the rules, but they're not doing it illegally. That's why we're changing it.
Well,
so how can they not be playing by the rules if we're having to change it to make it legal?
Well, you've got a conflict, and they aren't playing by the rules. And you ask if and again, this is why I kept saying that there's jeopardy. There's jeopardy possibly to the state from a point of view if the feds ever come in and audit and they find the conflict and they find we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing there, and those relationships aren't such as it meets the rules, okay, that maybe we as a state may be on the hook for those monies.
And one final...
Second of all,
go ahead.
The second of all, it's the business person who we're saying you can do this, but yet when they get audited from another perspective and they say, hey, you actually have your relationship here is not an independent contractor. The laws are such, and it's very clear that relationship is not an independent contractor. Then those businesses are going, hold on a second, we complied with Georgia law, but yet later on we got an audit and it could possibly cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in back taxes and payroll taxes, and what about workers' comp? What about unemployment issues? Okay?
Thank you. And one other final, if I'm assuming to a certain extent, like a lot of people do when they do independent contractors, they do it for the purpose to shield themselves from liability purposes. If they work for we be home health care agencies and they say we're hiring you as an independent contractor, then the independent contractor can be held liabilious, but not the company it's working for. I'm assuming that's part of the provision that they're trying to get away from as well. Would that be a correct statement?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure. Repeat your.
A lot of them want to be an independent because it shields them from some liability. That's.
I would argue that under the rules and the code that we've got here, those are the persons who are being paid.
Okay.
Okay. There's no way that they can. Hey, this was an independent contractor. I'm receiving the money from the client.
Okay. That's good enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Hawkins.
I'm just trying to get my arms around this, and I want you to help me understand this because I guess I'm lost. Right now, my mother had a stroke, and we went through some of this before she passed away. Right now, you have to be certified. The home health care people have to be certified to receive Medicare or Medicaid payments. It goes to the extent now that even though she bought a policy for extended care from an insurance company, in the policy said the person had to be certified. They only paid $70 and would only pay it to a certified person. She paid $40,000 and got nothing for it because you can't find someone that's certified. So I guess I'm getting down to this part. This private home health care provider, this is such a wide berth of people. I mean, we're talking about anything from hospice to a lady that was from Jamaica who came in and took care of my mother, did a wonderful job, but she was not, giving her medicine, but actually was a day and a nighttime watcher, and helped bathe her and that kind of thing. If we get down to the minutiae sometimes and listen to the federal government, we could get into places that we don't want to get into. So I'm just concerned, and I trust you. I know that you're a very good legislator. But I'm a little concerned about getting down and eliminating, because it says means any person. Line 11, any person. Doesn't have to be a business. Private home care provider, any person. That's getting down pretty low to be certified and to be, to be under the direction of the federal government.
Well, Representative, I want to go back to your issue of private contractors. When y'all or it was your mother, you said, entered into a contractual agreement for private insurance. Private insurance at that point stated the conditions of it. Okay, so from that perspective, and I know this is not trying to get in the weeds, but that's a relationship that when people enter into it, you have an issue, and I'm not trying to go there, but
right,
what
and I'm not either.
To do though is that the certification process for Georgia, okay, is conflicted, and if you look at this, you see that it's got the independent contractor language in here. But if you go look at every rule and regulation that they must comply with and follow, you read it, it says, I've read most of this, I can't find one place in the rule and reg where it says, where it talks about, your independent contractor that you have working for you. It's all about your employee, your staff, okay? It's your employee, and it's the supervision part, and that's where we've got a conflict. You can't be an independent contractor and get supervised.
Representative Knight, Representative Hawkins, unfortunately our lawyer's not here.
Right.
But there's a specific place in the law, Representative Knight,
Yeah.
that private home care provider is defined, and we're talking about business giving specific kind of care. It doesn't include where you hire somebody, take care of your mother outside that or anything. It's a definite definition in the area.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. But
No. Listen, if you're fine, I'm fine. I trust you.
No.
But I just want to make sure that we're not eliminating people, because by the definition I'm sitting right here that's in this section 1 says means any person. Any person under a private home health care provider. So I want to make sure we're just not getting down so low into the law here that we're affecting those. But I understand what Madam Chairman says.
No, but you,
because I don't have the definition in front of me.
I'm gonna let everybody, and since Betsy's not here and can look it up for us, Representative Knight, I'm gonna let the people continue to ask you questions, but I'm not going to take a vote today until we can clarify the rest of the questions for the committee.
Madam Chair, and I appreciate that, and this is a serious issue. I want serious debate on this, because I think this is a serious issue, and I appreciate full detail and questions.
If you'll take the questions,
yes,
and then try to clarify them, we're probably going to be meeting on Thursday. I'm trying to get a room and everything. I don't know. You'll get notification, but we try to make sure that answer for you and have somebody here to do that. Representative Beverly. So if you'll just, Representative Knight, if you'll keep a list of the questions people are asking you, so you can clarify them. Representative Beverly.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple quick questions for you. So in this statute, the independent contractor, in the statute, does it mean that all employees everyone who provides home health service now has to be an employee. You cannot be an independent contractor and provide home health services. Is that what this is saying? That you eliminated independent contractors, and so in order to give that service, everyone then would have to be an employee. Is that what that, when you strike that line?
Yeah, and I think what the relationship is you got the contract, the person who's receiving, payment. They're taking responsibility. I'm providing the service. But it's the staff and the means in which they do it. That's where that independent contractor piece comes in. You can't go out and, for instance, if I were to go out and, the way I understand it, set up a home care provider business, okay? And I sign up with the state, and I go out there, and then I go before the Department of Community Health, and I apply to be a licensed independent contractor, okay? And I've got to meet all those rules and regulations, okay, that's stated here in order to be in compliance with that, with being a home health care provider and keep my license, okay? But part of that is the supervision part of the people who work for me, okay? And that's where the problem is. So if you go out and say you contract with Representative Hawkins behind you, okay? At that point, if he's an independent contractor, how are you going to have control over him? An independent contractor, you don't have control over. You just, you're a professional. You went through school. Your license is top.
Right.
Yeah. We're independent contractors. Somebody can't tell you how to do an examination, can't tell you the tools that you use, how you do it, okay? You're responsible for that. Same way as a CPA, doctors, nurses, okay? But that person who's going out in that home, according to our rules and regulations, must be supervised. There's personnel records that must be kept. There's documentation of bonding in cases where that employee either has access to personal funds or personal vehicles. You've got to report back and do reviews of the plan. In other words, what does that patient need? Is it acute care, or is it simply, a little help around the house, so to speak, to get around? And so those plans must be reviewed. Are they being met? That independent contractor can't review their own plans. It's you, the business, that is in charge of and is responsible for those people.
Okay. So one follow-up question. So in the code section that you referred to, which was 31-7300, the section 3, which precedes section 4, talks about personal care tasks. And those personal care tasks include a litany of things that you can do under the auspices of a personal, as a home care business.
I'm sorry, what line is that?
It's in 31-7300. It's
Not here.
3. It's not on the
Okay.
bill, so you can look it up. So it's the actual personal tasks that go under that umbrella of being a personal care home. And in that, you have things like shaving, dental care, toiletry. I mean, there's an expanded definition of what personal care tasks are. And some of those instances, an independent contractor, this is where the question is, an independent contractor would be able to do that specific task under the personal care task, that they wouldn't necessarily have to be an employee of a company that's overlooking it. So, for instance, if there's dental care that has to be done under the personal care task, that dentist or that hygienist could be an independent contractor, come in, do their work, and have all the liability and resources that they need to do that particular function under that. But in this, the way that this reads, it says to me that no, that hygienist or that dentist would have to be an employee to actually provide this service. And that's what I'm afraid of when you take out independent contractor, that the personal care task will now be subject to being provided only by employees and not an independent contractor that actually could perform that task.
I appreciate your question. Unfortunately, I don't have the section in front of me, but I don't think, and I will get you an answer, because I think you raised a question that a lot of members on this committee have, and is that very question, are we doing something that could have an outside effect such as what you're speaking of? Representative, I don't think that's the case, but that is a great question, and if you'll give me a little time to do some homework, I will try to come back before you and the committee and make sure that I'm very crystal clear on that that's not indeed what this is doing.
Okay. Well, and I'd like to add to my question on that. I really, how the money flows, will the state pay directly Medicaid funds to the type of independent care provider that he's talking about. I don't believe they will under that issue. So I think the question is that somebody else is receiving the money. The flow of the money goes to a business.
Yeah.
And then they're paying this person. So if they're paying the person, how can they be independent? But will you check that?
I will. I
If
think I know
if
where
the
the chair-
Medicare will
Madam Chair
pay
is going.
that, okay. Representative Kaiser.
Madam Chairwoman, Chairman Knight, I totally understand what your intention is. I know you, I respect you, so I see what you're doing and understand. My question goes along the lines of Representative Beverly's, and not because you said it was a great question, by the way. Wouldn't this preclude a home health care provider from contracting for transportation services? I mean, that's my concern, because what he brought up about the scope of home health care, we're caring for a mother-in-law with Alzheimer's right now. We will eventually need home health care, and I know it is based on the type of payment, but if we had a fantastic home health care provider who was certified and met all the guidelines, but didn't have a car and needed a contract for services for transport, it feels to me like this would, I can't help but think maybe we should be looking at changing some of the regulations rather than the law in this case.
Well, Representative, to answer your question, and I'm going to ask a favor of the Madam Chair in a second, because I think we have someone in the audience can help describe in more detail actually what a home health care provider does in context, so we can probably figure out some of these things. But in your case about transportation, if you were to go to a licensed healthcare home provider, it says in the regulations, it actually has a section in there, again, I referred to that earlier, where, you know, they would have to be bonded if whoever they sent into your mother's home, okay, you know, they were helping them pay bills. Or, for instance, transportation, so they were using your mother's vehicle that she no longer is able to drive, but that home health care provider is actually driving her around. I would think from your perspective and your family's perspective and your mother's perspective, that you would want to make sure that from a liability point of view, that you are protected. You've got someone who is properly insured, who is properly trained, or who is bonded. I mean, if that person is helping with your mom's personal expenses, helping them write checks, or has access to your finances, are they adequately bonded? What about insured and for a vehicle? So if for instance, going back to Representative Beverly, he formed this company and he hired Representative Hawkins behind him as an independent contractor, and he went out and got your mom's car, but yet he had a DUI, he didn't have insurance, he didn't have anything else, and y'all were in an accident.
What?
Who is responsible at that point?
But, Madam Chair, can I follow up, Madam Chairwoman?
No, she hired Representative Beverly.
Can I follow up?
Yes, let's.
So,
what?
well, I guess
Hang on, guys.
I
Get your
just,
cell phone.
and I know somebody in the audience can speak to this, and will speak to it. Mine's a little different question. So my mother-in-law doesn't have a car, but we were able to say hire a certified home health professional. We want to keep her in her home. This person is going to now be given medications, doing the things that we have to have that certified person for. This bill, in my opinion, would preclude her, that home health service provider, from hiring a bonded, licensed transportation service. That'd be an independent contractor.
I tell you what, and Madam Chair, I'm going to ask for your indulgence, if you can, because there's a person who is actually in the industry who may be able to answer these questions that are being posed, if the madam.
Right, fine. Just to come and identify themselves?
Yes.
Sure.
Dave, if you could. Madam Chair.
And we do have another bill, which happens to be mine.
Uh-oh. We will be brief.
I'm going to do pass.
Wait. On my bill or his? So.
I'll second that motion, ma'am. Madam Chair.
Okay, and so since we are going to send him back to answer all these questions for y'all and not vote today, can we keep your answers brief?
Yes, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Dave Lamb. I'm General Manager of CareMaster Medical Services in Griffin, Georgia. We are a licensed private home care provider in the state of Georgia. And our license and the things that David has been talking about, we've got two regulatory requirements. First of all, the state is very explicit in what our licensure requirements are. We have to go through, all of our employees are screened. They have to be screened, background checks. They have to have proper credentials. We even screen for, make sure everybody has a negative test for tuberculosis. Those type of things are required. We did have a choice whether our employees would be W-2 employees or independent contractors. But the choice is really not a legal choice, because if you look further in the licensure requirements, we are required to have a care plan, and we do two types of business. We do Medicaid, and that's more than half of our business, but we're also a catastrophic care provider. We specialize in traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. We have clients all over the state of Georgia. Those requirements specify, if you're looking at our skilled side of the business, they specify that we must have doctor's orders. They must be in the files, and those doctor's orders are used by an assessment nurse, an RN, to build a care plan. That care plan is then used to build a set of duties that our caregiver or the skilled nurse provides when they're rendering care. And there's no, I mean, you've got to do that. And then you have to periodically, and it depends on the type of the client and the type of the business or the payer source, we have to provide supervisory visits. Now, in our chain of command, for instance, I'm operations, I am not clinical. So, technically, there is an RN component on both sides of our business that provides the clinical supervision, and the nurses on site, they will provide that, the supervisory inspections, the counseling of caregivers or the training of caregivers on things that they're supposed to do or may not have been following exactly that plan of care. That's critical. Okay, on the Medicaid side of the business, and the licensure says we have to do that. We have to take that care plan. It has to be based on doctor's orders. We have to then provide duties based upon that care plan, and then we have to supervise. We have to follow up. We've got folks on the operational side that do schedules. They, the directions, and maybe the unskilled tasks. They take care of that. On the Medicaid side of the business, all right, we've got this licensure requirement setting up there. Well, guess what? The Medicaid requirements are very similar. They're actually probably more detailed, but for the Medicaid, we do an assessment, and we kind of agree with the referral site, and the referral site will have an RN that has already done an assessment, and we build a care plan. All right, for Medicaid, we're helping with activities of daily living. We are typically CNAs, certified nursing assistants, and they are providing help with activities of daily living. All right, but they have duty sheets, and those duty sheets will have the client's name, their name, and the list of duties that they're supposed to do for that client. If they go to client A in the morning and client B in the afternoon, there's two different duty sheets and two different sets of duties. And we're required to supervise that. And then, depending upon the type of services they receive, every 62 or every 92 days, a nurse has to be in the home and has to supervise to make sure that that's going correctly. But there's more to that. We happen to be on a Medicaid 2-week pay cycle. So every 2 weeks, all those duty sheets come in, and they have to be faxed or emailed or delivered to us. He's trying to tell me to be short, I think. Okay, sorry. Brevity.
Are you a lawyer? Are you a lawyer?
No, ma'am, absolutely not.
Thought you charged by the hour too.
No, not at all. Okay, we have to look at those payroll documents, and we have a Medicaid compliance area, and we review them to make sure that what they did matches the care plan. Now, that is an operations person, if you will. Once that's approved, and at that point we say we're able to pay and we can bill Medicaid. But we have an RN that goes behind and to make sure that there is nothing that does not match that care plan, or if there is a need to change a care plan. And we change care plans on a regular basis. I hope that, because I heard several questions, and we already have these requirements.
Madam Chair, I know that time is of the nature, and I appreciate Dave coming up, and I appreciate the discussion. There's been some great questions from the committee. We're going to go back and see if we can't clarify, review the questions, make sure that we've got answers for the committee, and come back for further discussion.
Okay, let me give you all right. I have 5 people that, okay, Representative Barr, Sharper, Clark, Stevenson, and Pruitt. Does anybody have a question that they want to do now that they can't ask, Representative Knight privately? Okay, I know Representative Pruitt does. Is there anybody else? Representative Sharper. Okay. Is it Stevenson? Do you want to ask it now?
I can ask it privately or now or the next meeting.
Okay.
And
Do
once
you-
we have to
huh?
stick around.
Mine is very brief.
Okay. Now? Okay. All right. Let me go down by the thing. Representative Sharper, you were first on the list.
Okay.
Be a bit short.
Well, it's going to be short, but the big confusing thing here is at one point it was sounding like it was a quality of care issue, and then one side it looked like it was a liability issue. And what's confusing also when you say that the independent contractors can't do certain things. Now, if the independent contractor is working for the company, then they are actually accountable to that, to that company. So if they have requirements, guidelines, all these different things that you're saying that you require your staff to do, they're also accountable to it. And that's the confusing thing when you say they can't do it, but they can do it because if you're paying them to do it and you got a follow-up system, I don't think you're just going to put them out there and say, do it, and we're not going to hold you accountable. So that's the biggest confusion for me is you're saying that they can't do it. Now, if it's in the law that they can't do it, they can't. But if you're just not happy with their scope of practice and their services, that's another thing. So I want that clarified.
We will work on that.
Okay.
What? Okay. Let me go in order. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chairman Knight, for bringing this bill. Obviously, I have a lot of respect for you and working on your committee and your leadership and all. But I do have a few questions, and I will be brief. I understand, but maybe you could bring some of these up on Thursday. Is for one, I own a real estate brokerage, and so I'm really having a disconnect, kind of like Representative Sharper there on I have a lot of liability for the agents underneath me that are independent contractors. My second concern is the cost of care. I remember having this debate, I thought, a couple of years ago, and so my concern is, and I'm seeing this with my constituents, is we have small providers. I understand you're a large provider, large scale, and you've been quite successful. But we got small guys who are needing to get independent contractors to be able to grow and scale up. And the last question that I have is, I guess I'm trying to be real short, is this going to apply also to home health care, personal care homes? Because I remember there being some discussion about them providing, contractors providing non-ambulatory.
No, this is just with the licensure of just like the CPA or a real estate. That's in there's law that determines what is a real estate agent, and there's the rules and regs, and you're within your industry. Same thing as a CPA. There's a section of what CPAs and the law, and then your board or whatever the agency is that's over that promulgates the rules and regs. That's what we're talking about here. All of what we're talking about that's outside of this scope, I'm not fooling with that. So your real estate issue or all those other issues, we're not going there. We're going within what is a home health care provider.
Representative Knight. Okay. Okay. Let's go on to Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Knight, am I correct that we've adopted a statute in Georgia that includes contractual arrangements for independent contractors? statute, this law allows for contractual arrangements with independent contractors.
Yes.
And then the state of Georgia, that's existing code, then the state of Georgia, regardless of what entity, adopted rules that were inconsistent with the statute. Okay, so I understand the time, manner, method. So what we're trying to do now is change the code to be consistent with the rules that were meant to interpret this code.
You can look at, well, hey, you can change either one.
No, but you're trying to, yeah, but what you're proposing to do, no, I'm just asking, what you're proposing to do is to change the statute to be consistent with the rules.
Yes.
Okay, so it really isn't about the clinical aspect. We're just describing what the rules state versus what the statute has allowed.
I'm not sure about the clinical there.
Well, we talked about providing services, but that's not really the issue. The issue that you're trying to bring before us, if I'm correct, is to allow the statute to be consistent with the current rules.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam
Short
Chair.
and sweet, please.
Pardon me?
Short and sweet.
My
I know you're from South Georgia. Talk fast.
My wife's short and I'm sweet. No, I got that backwards. I'm short and she's sweet. Okay.
I don't know if I'd said that.
Well, I'm said it backwards. I apologize. I appreciate the bill. I'm the one that actually brought the bill several years ago to allow us to have people come in by choice as to who you wanted to have in your home to take care of you. And maybe that's where some of this laws come into effect since that legislation was passed, so that you could pick your own provider, and you also could sign a liability waiver so that that's not an issue. But I think the contractual thing is, let me ask you this. When you hire an independent contractor, does he have the right to hire and fire himself? Not himself, but does he have a right to hire and fire people?
An independent contractor?
Well, yes, but we're not employed in that type of business, so I'm not as familiar with it.
But most of them, they don't hire and fire anybody, number one. Number two is they only work for you.
That's not necessarily the case.
Well, to be a contractor, you have to work for more than one independent, more than one person or one company, and you have to be able to have the ability to hire and fire your own people. If not, you cannot be classified as a contractor. That's state law. So it sounds like to me that's what you're trying to clear up. You're not trying to change anything, you're not trying to do anything to change the independent care person that they can still care and pick their own and sign their own waivers. None of that's changing. Is that correct?
The home care provider, yeah, they can pick who they
Okay.
want to. It's the fact that they can't have, whoever they pick, they can't have an independent.
The independent contractor definition seems to be the problem here. And you and I are in the same suite, and we need to talk about this some more, and I can't believe you hadn't already asked me for my advice since I'm
Okay.
across the hall.
This afternoon.
Representative Knight, if I lose my quorum on my committee, you won't be invited back to this, so thank you very much for coming. Will the members of the committee please go to Representative Knight and ask him any questions and let him explain to this before we bring this back again? No, I mean, I think this is an important issue, and I would like for you to vet it with him, so, and make sure he answers all your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all.
Okay, stick that one up in the front like that. Okay, this, my bill is $8.99.
I don't need that. I'm plenty tall enough. Okay, as we get started, we're going to keep moving. We'd like to recognize Chairman Cooper is going to present House Bill 899.
I think there's a substitution to the bill, and I'm sorry the staff has not passed it out to you, but it is one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be very brief, but I will say that several people have come and would like to speak on the bill, and if it is okay with you, I'll call a few of them up, okay, in the order that I would like them. Is that okay?
Absolutely, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. To members of the committee, Basically, I'm bringing this bill. If you remember 2 years ago, this committee passed a bill, and it was about unlicensed personal care homes and the problem they were becoming across the state and the elder abuse that people in our communities, all of our state, were finding, and especially in these small personal care homes that were unlicensed, where they were taking the people's Social Security checks. They were leaving them in horrible conditions, and when they were found, they had 60 days to go get a license. There was no punishment for it, and what they found instead, they just disappeared and started operating somewhere else. This committee, in their wisdom, made it a misdemeanor on the first time you did it and a felony the second time you were caught running a personal care home without a license. Well, apparently that is not enough. A misdemeanor seems to be insignificant to these people who are taking advantage of some of our most vulnerable citizens. And so people in our community and across the state ask that it be raised to a felony on the first offense when they are caught, with the judge having the right to lower that if the circumstances warrant it. And that is what this bill does. And with that, I would like to call people from my community and some of the others around the state. And I have to give a shout out to Cobb's Task Force on Elder Abuse. They are leading the way in this state in community activity and bringing our community all sorts of people, from the hospitals to the sheriffs to all the cities, police force and so forth, in trying to deal with this growing problem. We are an aging state, and we're getting about 4 elderly people for every 1 young person. And as I look across my committee, a lot of us are getting there very quickly to be in this situation where we would fall into the elderly category. So first, I would... Pardon? Thank you very much. So, first of all, I would like to call Chief Dan Flynn. He is Chief of the Marietta Police Force, and he is a real champion for elders in our country, in our county, and across this state. Chief Flynn. And he did pass out. He didn't have enough copies for everybody floating around, or just some of the pictures that he saw in one of our cases. Chief Flynn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just take a few moments of your time and hopefully explain to you about some of the pictures that were distributed. And I'd like to do that, just quickly I just have a few minutes of give you a police perspective and tell you what we've found in the area of unlicensed care homes. And I'd like to begin talking about when really the problem of unlicensed care homes got on the radar of the Marietta Police Department. I'm chief of the Marietta Police Department here talking to you, which is part of the Cobb Elder Abuse Task Force. And we first really became aware of the scope of the problem in 2012 when we got a call. One of our officers got a call where 2 nurses who traveled from place to place and cared for folks called and asked for an officer to come and meet them at actually it was a McDonald's restaurant. And there was a problem. They had with them a woman in her 50s who was mentally handicapped, severely mentally handicapped. And they had just rescued her from an unlicensed home that was in the garage of a house. It was a sweltering condition. The woman was starving. She was, the garage was sweltering hot. She was, for the most part, locked in the room and deprived of medications and deprived of food, and she was in terrible condition. We investigated the case immediately. We got this information and ultimately went through and leveled charges of elder abuse against the operator of the facility, which was unlicensed, and developed a case about all the charges relevant to the deprivation of medications and food and other necessary services. And we brought that case to the prosecutors. Ultimately, there was a plea bargain in the case, and with all of these things well proven, at the end of the day, there was a plea bargain, and the operator of this unlicensed facility was given a sentence of 1 day credit time served for the day she spent in jail waiting to be bonded out on the charge. That really got our attention. That was in 2012, before our current prosecutor started, but really made us think about it. After that case, Marietta Police Department we were invited into the Cobb Elder Abuse Task Force and went to the first meeting, and we met with some of the state regulators who are very concerned with this, with the Adult Protective Services Division of the state, and also healthcare facility regulation, and learned about how bad of a problem unlicensed facility is. Now, we went to that first meeting and met with those folks. Within a few days of that meeting, we got the call on the second case that I'd like to take just a few quick minutes and tell you about. Second case is we got a call from one of the regulators we met at the meeting. They were called to a local hospital, and they had a lady there, an elderly lady who had been brought in from a facility. She was in terrible condition, and she was complaining about the place that she had been brought from. It was a care facility that she said was really bad. Well, the state regulators, they were notified by the hospital of the woman's complaints, and they came out, responded very quickly, and listened to what she had to say, and then they went out to check out the facility. When they got to the facility, a man answered the door. They told who they were. They basically got the door slammed in their face. So a place in a relatively nice suburban neighborhood, and they got the door slammed in their face. They didn't know what to do, but they remembered meeting our investigator at the task force meeting, so they called him. He responded to the location, and quickly talking to the victim. It was just about a day and a half later after they were rebuffed at the door, and he talked to the original victim, talked to the healthcare regulators, went to the home, found mail for multiple people in the mailbox, and talked to neighbors who said there were some unusual goings on, ambulances coming at all hours of the day and night, and elderly people, and they said that some people had been hurriedly taken out of the house the day before. So put all that information together, got a search warrant for the house, went into the house and found the conditions that are depicted in the photographs that we passed around. Found that there were down in the basement of the house, and you wouldn't know this by looking at the outside of the house, but in the basement of the house were these makeshift partitions. There were rooms with no beds and just partitioned sections. I wouldn't even really call them rooms. There were inadequate. People had been there, in some cases sleeping on the floor, some cases on blankets and whatnot. No beds. There were you see the pictures of a refrigerator that were in there that have been passed around that were just deplorable. There was one bathroom with the toilet wasn't working at the time, and there were no bathing facilities. There was no shower, no bathing facilities for these people. I'll move right along. We began our investigation. We quickly charged the operator of the unlicensed facility with operating an unlicensed facility with the newer law that y'all passed, and we thank you for that. And went on, continued our investigation to try to find the folks that had been in this place that we called it a house of horrors. You can see from the photographs why. And we started investigating where these folks had been taken to, because we had mail and correspondence from multiple people in the house. And within a few days, as we're doing that investigation, we get a call from the Atlanta Police Department. They had been called to a house where some elderly people were being pretty much held captive. And the Atlanta officers were there. They had heard about our case, and so they called us, and we sent our investigator down to see that house. In that house, it was the people who were we found mail and correspondence from in our case, and they were being held. They were completely being deprived of their medications and food and other services, necessary services. And the individual who was guarding the place was the same man who had rebuffed the regulators in the Marietta case. He was the same. They had just moved them to another of these unlicensed facilities. And the woman that we had already charged with running the previous facility was connected with this place as well. So we charged all of these folks, and parts of this are still ongoing, so I can't use name. We charged them with unlicensed facility, and based on what we saw in the Atlanta case, we charged them with elder abuse. And as that case went on, and I'll wind this down, but this case goes on, one of the women that was being held in the Atlanta location and being deprived of her medication, in this case I'm not a doctor, but the medication that she was being deprived of was Coumadin. She has since died of a stroke sometime after being taken out of that house. Case goes on a little bit further, and the operator, the female operator of these facilities, really the lead person, was picked up about a month or so later in a reverse sting in Gwinnett County. She was picked up for prostitution, in a prostitution sting in Gwinnett County. In her possession at the time of her arrest were multiple credit cards and multiple IDs and all kinds of identification for not only our victims in our case and the Atlanta case as well, but other people that weren't even there. And we're tracking down all of those folks now. Faced with all of this stuff, we began looking at something else. We're concerned with our county, and so limiting it to Cobb County, we did a simple comparison. We compared the number of places that advertised elder care homes in Cobb County, the number of places that advertised them with the number. We had a list from the state. The state provided, here's a list of licensed personal home care facilities, and we found a discrepancy of 22. There were 22 places in our county that are advertising these services but not licensed by the state to provide them. Some of the ads look quite nice, but they are not licensed, so we are still doing that comparison. I'll conclude by saying that our feeling, we have really two perspectives. I'm giving you a police perspective, and this is opinion about these. In 100% of the care facilities that we have, unlicensed personal care facilities that we have looked at, the facility itself was really just a cover for much more serious crimes, for the crime of theft of medications from elderly people, of theft of financial fraud, and theft of their money and their sustenance, and several other things. It was just, really the unlicensed facility itself was just a cover for much more serious things. And the final thing, and this is just a perspective I wanted to share with you, when you think about a care facility, a personal care facility, when you say I am going to take someone into a personal care facility, you're accepting custody of a human being with all of the responsibilities that go with custody, all the responsibilities and liabilities. And if you do that and you don't do it right, it is just an atrocity of what can happen to the at-risk adults, what can happen to not only the mentally and physically handicapped, but the elderly, and that's a very serious responsibility, and therefore we support this bill, which elevates the penalty for doing that. Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, there was a question from one of the committee members for you, if I could.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I skipped over in my hurry.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Jones.
Yes, Madam Chair, I want to ask a question about, you said that some of the people don't consider or don't look at the misdemeanor. Did we think about or look at charging a fine in addition to the misdemeanor before just making it a felony? I don't support elderly abuse, but I'm just asking, was a fine thought about or talked about?
They have that option to do a fine, and it doesn't seem to matter about it. Doesn't seem to deter it, Representative Jones. And I will tell you that even after the task force and all the publicity that the case in Cobb County got, what happened as, and although they were members of the task force in Cobb County, the Cobb police detective that was in charge of the one person who went out to, look and bring charges on unlicensed personal care homes, told the investigator that they were not going to prosecute misdemeanors, and she was not to go out and to check on these because they were misdemeanors. That's in Cobb County. After all of this information and Chief Flynn finding that there were 22 of these homes, and the way they get people are through these very attractive ads that say they're personal care facilities, and they get them in and in their places and then abuse them, as you heard. I mean, not giving an elderly person Coumadin when they need it, very often, if it's because they have high blood pressure and all, then can lead to the stroke, which, like he gave the example, the person died from. I have two district attorneys. First, Vic Reynolds.
Pardon me, Madam Chairman.
Oh,
There's
sorry,
a couple other
another question?
questions.
Okay. Sorry.
Representative Henson.
You said one. So, sorry.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. One of the concerns that I have is oftentimes I've had this brought to me by a constituent. They looked up someone for a personal care home. Person was licensed. However, the personal care home, the individual is licensed, but the home that they put their mother into or relative was not a licensed home. So I know we're addressing the concern and the issue, and I don't know if that can be addressed also, but where a person will have a licensed one and also an unlicensed
That
one.
happened in Gwinnett. They got somebody for two of them, I think, if y'all will remember, and the woman was running another 6 that were, she had 2 licensed one where they were abusing people in deplorable conditions, and she had like either 6 or 8 others that were unlicensed. And they found one of them, and what they do is they move these people from one to the other. And it's one of the ways that they, when somebody complains about one, they will isolate them and tell their family, oh, they can't come see you, or we take them to the doctor, and then they'll move them to another. So it's like this,
And
it's
just
almost
sort
a
of
human
as a
trafficking.
follow-up, it's difficult for individuals that are trying to place a parent, a relative, or someone in a place, and they try to do their due diligence. They try to make sure the place is licensed, and they'll look, and it's just a very difficult situation.
There is a place with DCH where you can call and you can see if a home that you are considering is licensed. I cannot tell you that right now, but I can get it for you. So families can do that, but there is nothing that will replace somebody checking on that elderly person at all different times of night and day, night and day, and going to these places. But unfortunately, when people are living to be 85 and 90 and 95, they often don't have anybody left to check on them, and that is a real problem. Got another one? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Mitchell.
Madam Chair, I too want to applaud you for bringing forth this legislation, but perhaps this should be directed at the officer. Is there something inherent in the licensure that we feel that maybe my question is are the penalties sufficient for even a licensed personal care home if they should commit these acts for which you depicted in the pictures? Are the penalties sufficient?
On the license?
Yeah. I'm not aware of any problems with the penalties, but I know once you have to submit to licensing, you have to meet a lot of standards and a lot of scrutiny, and that really precludes the kinds of problems that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chairman, I move to pass.
Well, we're not that far yet.
And let's go home.
Representative Kidd.
Thank you. Very brief, Madam Chairman.
Okay, I'm getting payback for teasing Representative Kelly. It's okay, guys.
Obviously, we all know that there are laws on the books now to penalize people for having these homes that aren't licensed. It sounds like that somebody has learned from the old mafia guy, Paul Estes or something, that was transferring grain from one silo to another silo to keep them getting caught from having enough legal silos, and they're doing it in the medical care now. Years ago, committees like yours did unannounced visits to different facilities throughout the state and saw where this type of thing was taking place. unannounced, of course. And would it not be beneficial in passing this legislation also to look at possibly doing some of that unannounced visits in the future?
Hold on a second. Chief Lynn, could the next time you have to go out, would it be okay if I called all my admitted committee members and asked them if anyone wanted to go with you? Absolutely. Okay, are y'all all up for that, for me to call you when they're going out to see one of the unlicensed ones? If he lets me know, I'll be glad to let you know that one.
As we move quickly, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This looks like a great bill. Thank you. I just have a question just to educate myself. What happens if somebody is caring for someone in their church? Like, for example, my in-laws took an elderly gentleman in who was dying of cancer and obviously provided great care, but
They don't follow under this one. This is a group type home.
Okay.
So taking an individual in your home is fine.
Okay. The definition
Now, if they abuse them and somebody calls the Cobb County hotline that the Cobb Elderly Task Force has come up, and their new saying is, if you see something, say something, and we're trying to get that out to the community about elder abuse. If you see something, say something, because the home that the sheriff was talking about was in a middle-class neighborhood with a manicured lawns and everything. It looks like a place that any of us could live in. It wasn't in a rundown neighborhood, and it was one of the ones that was in such terrible situation. So unless the person is abusing the person, and they wouldn't fall under this law anyway, they would just fall under elder abuse.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Reinders.
My only question is on line 12, and it's just because I'm not a member of the judiciary or whatever. The commissioner.
That's the commissioner of DCH.
Okay. I didn't know if there was any confusion there, if that could be the county commissioner, the this or the that. I'm just asking a
I'll be
plain
glad
deal.
if you want to put
I just didn't know what that meant.
just the way Legislative Counsel and Betsy, who is our legal thing, wrote it
Right.
up, but it's the DCH.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clark. Mallory.
Do you have
You're lit up.
You're blink? We're blinking. All right. We're good now, Madam Chair.
Oh, great. Thank you. I didn't
Next.
mean to.
There you go.
I guess I was in such a hurry because we've had so many people come to, and we sort of got bogged down in the other bill that I didn't want to take too much of the time. My district attorney, who campaigned on going after elder abuse, is here, Vic Reynolds. And then after Vic Reynolds, we have Mr. Smith, who's from the Piedmont Circuit District Attorney. And I know that Mr. Speos, who is with all the district attorneys, wants to say something too.
And we're also going to ask them to be very brief. Right, Madam Chairman?
Yeah, I'm going to show you a lawyer can be brief, Madam Chair. So I want to take a moment to thank you. I'm Vic Reynolds, the District Attorney of Cobb County, and I think I heard Representative Sharper make a motion to pass, so I don't want to talk Madam Chair out of a victory. But I did want to let you know that I'm very much in favor of this particular bill. And to answer your question, I believe a personal care home would be defined at the minimum of 2 people or more, so it wouldn't be somebody taking into a home. But it's rare that a district attorney would come to committee and ask for more work to be assigned to their office, but this is a good bill, increasing the punishment level of this particular type of crime. I think this committee legally is on solid ground, but even more important than that, from a principled, moral point of view, we owe it to that demographic to do everything we can do to protect them. I'd respectfully ask the committee to pass favorably on the bill. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm the long-haired district attorney. I'm Brad Smith. This is a problem we're seeing a lot of throughout the state, especially in my circuit. When you have a problem of an aging population with cheap, inexpensive housing and easy government money coming in, you're going to attract ne'er-do-wells that are trying to do this. And so there's a lot of them out there. I shudder to, there's 2 active cases in my circuit right now. I shudder to think how many of them we don't know about. A lot of the times, listening to the different people talk, you all talk about your family members and the family members this. And we have this opinion of family members being these people that care and want the best for the person. But in my reality, I've found there's a lot of families out there that just want this burden lifted from them. And these people don't have anyone looking after them. The family members don't care. The people don't care. And they go into these facilities. They suffer. They're tortured. And they die. And no one knows about it. So I think it's imperative that government step in and be able to protect these people that don't have anyone looking out for them. Thank you very much.
Hang on just 1 second. You have a question? Representative Peake.
Mr. DA, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. You know, I think we're all in support of this bill. Do we need to make it tougher? Do we need to have more penalties? Is this going to be enough to make sure we get these bad criminals that are doing this, according to your expertise as a DA?
I don't think in this particular law it needs to be tougher for the unlicensed, but I do believe there should be more punishment and more things out there to get everyone. One of my most horrific case is a licensed facility. Okay. I think there needs to be teeth into it.
This is going to be. This is enough teeth for you.
That's correct.
Okay.
For this part, it's one of those. A steering wheel's no good if there's no tires on the car, but that doesn't mean I'm not against putting steering wheels in cars.
Got it.
I'd like to. Y'all go ahead and put the steering wheel in, and maybe later you can give me some more tires.
I think as you see, we're all supportive of it, so go get them. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Spaso with the District Attorneys Association, if you have any questions. I will say, if you will send us what you need, I'll be glad to carry that, or it sounds like Representative Peake would be glad to. Mr. Smith, if you think there's another area, there is a big task force, especially with Alzheimer moving, and I know the department and the head of elder abuse, they're trying to look at all these laws, but if there's something specific we're not doing, it's a little late this year. But I carried it 2 years ago, and I know there's people on my committee that would be glad to carry changes for you. So, okay. I also have Mr. Perdue with the Cobb Solicitor's Office. Do you need to?
I'm here, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Representing Barry Morgan, the Solicitor General of Cobb County. We currently prosecute the misdemeanors in this area, and will do so vigorously. But having prosecuted both after 34 years in business, I've done felonies and misdemeanors like the other prosecutors in this room, and the deterrent effect of a felony cannot be underestimated. We ask that you consider upgrading these penalties. Very much needed. Thank you.
And Joe Gavalis is here with a task force from Cobb County. Joe, can we?
Yes, we support this bill 100%, and thank you for your interest, and whatever we can do, we will certainly try to give the information.
And thank you. And I know there are other people on the list. If you want to call them, those were the only ones from Cobb County. And once again, I want to give Cobb County, and I tell you that once we found out what the Cobb County police officer said, they will be prosecuting whatever kind of cases come before them. My commissioner saw to that. So thank you to the committee.
Thank you. There are a number of people signed up to speak on the bill. We're just in the essence of time. Do you have something different to say or a pressing need? We have 4 or 5 others. If you would stand up. Go ahead and come to the mic, please. I guess. And also identify yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I won't take any time. I'm Melanie McNeil. I'm the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. We see unlicensed and licensed personal care homes that provide not good care all over the state. It's not just a Cobb County issue, although I think it was a very dramatic presentation. I just urge you to pass this bill and to help it get all the way through.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the rest of the committee members. I'm Vicki Johnson, and I am Legislative Chair of the Georgia Council on Aging, and also here representing the hundreds of members of the Co-Age Coalition across the state. We support this bill. We believe that as long as this crime remains a misdemeanor, that the risk to the victim far outweighs the risk to the perpetrator, and we ask for your favorable consideration.
My name is Kathy Simpson. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the Alzheimer's Association Georgia Chapter, and we would just like to applaud Representative Cooper for taking the action and the leadership to make this bill happen, and we appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Okay, tell her you don't think she wants to say anything.
And I believe Ms. Humberstone has passed. Thank you.
Okay. What are the wishes of the committee?
What are the wishes of the committee? Chairman Reinders.
I'd like to be recognized for a motion to pass.
We have a motion and a second for due pass. Any more discussions?
It's due pass by committee sub.
That's a due pass by committee sub, I've been told to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, raise your right hand, please. Or aye? We got it. Those opposed, opposite. This bill passes.
Thank you very much to the committee. I appreciate your waiting. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.